Hey everybody, welcome to another Indie Hour. For those of you catching this for the first time, this is the show where we talk about games that you may not have heard of, seen before, or experienced, and try and throw as big a spotlight as possible on independent content creators and the things that they make. This show is picked by my patrons through a poll system that we do every single week, where they pick a game and then I pair it like a gaming sommelier with an excellent sort of like comparison game. So you can get the most of your model collection, or if you like games in that genre, you have multiple options to play with the same miniatures. This is recorded live with my patrons, and so if you are hanging out in the chat today and you can see the little chat window, I'm pointing it, whether it be this way, in the window, up, there it is. That would be the lovely folks that pick this stuff. And they get to see this a week early because we do the recordings live with them. I do some interactive stuff in between games where I answer questions or get their feedback or their comments on the games themselves. And then we dive in and do the second game and like kind of catch up all at the end. You guys get to see it a week later on YouTube. So if you want to be part of the fun, help pick the games, or you have a cool game and just want to get involved, then you can jump on my Patreon at patreon.com/Guerrilla Miniature Games. This is one of our weekly shows that we do along with the Monday show. And soon on the paint table, which is coming back in a new form on Saturdays, when I can figure out how to get my at-home computer's cameras to recognize the version of OBS that's on it, to see in the future. So, today we are going to be checking out Magos Buer, who, if you're in the 28 community, you probably recognize that name. His game, 1490 Doom. Survive the unrelenting horrors of a dying world. I don't know what it is, but the grim darkness of most games, there is nothing but unrelenting horrors, and we do enjoy those. So this is a game of both solo, co-op, and head-to-head play, and you have access through the shop here, if you want to check it out, to a bunch of additional stuff too, like a solo mission, and STLs that come with the game as well. So in this one right here, you can go check out The Fall of Rothenburg also as the ebook on the shop, and they have a cool bundle where you get STLs to print out. So in this game, in this like campaign system, The Fall of Rothenburg, you get the campaign ebook, you get a new warrior class, you get a Doom company, and then you get the Wilhelm and Berenger STLs, the protagonists of the storyline, basically, as miniatures. And you get an official music, Wilhelm's theme, immerse yourself in the haunting soundscape of Rothenburg. So it's a cool survival horror experience for one player. And then the core rulebook, you're also going to get the like big sort of like core mechanical customization stuff. That's what we're going to look at today. And they do a bundle where you can get both for like a reduced price. And that's what I picked up because I love solo and co-op games. And I basically was thinking what I could do is I could review this and then I could play the solo and co-op stuff on GMG and you guys can see some gameplay action as well. That's my plan for the future. Whenever there's a solo and cooperative thing, I jump right on it. And a lot of my patrons are into solo and co-op gaming as well. Not so much a head-to-head crowd, more of a modeling and story-driven crowd. So this fit along nicely. Now, one of the reasons we decided to cover this week is one of my patrons, good friends, and fellow game designer, Malev de Shinobi, is the painter of these miniatures and the photographer. Look what a good job he did. And he'd been working on this stuff, and that kind of brought to our attention as a group. And so the patrons politely picked it. I bullied them a little bit into doing it, but look at the great job he did painting these. Wonderful paint jobs, really good photography, actually. The depth of field on these is really nice, too. And so that's the quality you can expect when you look through this rulebook, where they've done like a really good job of kind of, like you can see the color palette even of the layout and stuff like that matches the photography, which is really, really cool. And the art style and stuff too. So, and the art is by Barrett Stanley, and you might recognize that name as he is the artist that did Rangers of Shadowdeep, iconic grimdark artist, with like a beautiful sort of like, almost like chiaroscuro style, where there's like lots of silhouetting and high contrast, like this high contrast body here. A fantastic artist, and has worked closely with folks like Joe McCullough, of course, on Rangers of Shadowdeep. So let's have a look at our rulebook. Okay, this is available in print as well as a hardcover, which you can buy. But I have the ebook here for us all to check out because it's not that easy for me to look through a physical copy. And the Indie Hour is being about self-publishers. I tend to pick things that you guys can pick up right away as well. And if you are interested in checking this out in the future, all the links for the physical and the digital media will be in the description for the video itself. So, created by Eric Michael Robertson. The game designs by Eric Michael Robertson and Cody Taylor. The layouts by Cody Taylor, and the artwork's by Barrett Stanley. It's a work of fiction. Don't believe everything you hear about 1490 Doom. It's not the real world. It makes me sad sometimes that we have to have that stuff in here, but you know, this is the world we live in. This isn't the real world. Don't believe anything that you hear in here. There's gonna be terrible stuff. It is a nice, concise 60-page rulebook. If you're a fan of things like Forbidden Psalm, or the Rangers of Shadow Deep series, or any of those sort of like dark fantasy series, the page count is such that you can see that the rules for the game are designed not to necessarily get into the way of the story that's emergent from the game. It's not rules light, but it's rules specific to narrative, right? So, the history of the creeping death. The dawn of despair in 1490. The year 1490 marked the beginning of humanity's descent into a nightmare from which there would be no waking. Sound grim dark enough for you? It started innocuously enough as tales of strange occurrences began to trickle through the remote corners of Europe. So this is set in a dark fantasy version of our world. Farmers reported a foul stench rising from the earth, a miasma that clung to the air and suffocated the very life from the soil. This was the first sign of what would kind of be known as the creeping death. As the spring thaw gave way to summer, the stench spread, seeping into every corner of the ground. Fields that had once been lush and green turned barren. The crops withering under the relentless assault of the unseen enemy. The harvests failed in every region. Wheat, barley, grapes, all spoiled to the ground. Livestock too began to perish, and their bodies bloating and rotting where they fell. Famine gripped the land, and the people began to speak a curse, a divine retribution of something long forgotten. So this basically spreads until 1494. By the spring of 1494, the creeping death had risen higher than any man. The fog now enveloped a world in a shroud of death, its tendrils reaching up to claim the last remnants of humanity. Cities that at once stood proud were now ghostly silhouettes in the mist, their inhabitants either dead or fled to the highest towers, praying for salvation. Basically, it's the mists, right? And the fog engulfs the entire world, and you have to try and fight to get to the highest points of land so that you can survive and not get eaten by all the weird insanity that's down and in there. It's kind of like Lovecraftian and stuff like that. So doom companies are what you're representing basically on the tabletop here. As the creeping death began its relentless rise in the spring of 1490, society began to quickly unravel. Nations, kingdoms, and empires found themselves powerless against the creeping fog that claimed the land inch by inch. Doom companies formed a necessity. Entire towns and villages were swallowed, and those who survived quickly realized they couldn't survive alone. So a doom company is effectively your zombie movie band of protagonists, right? They're a group of like people forged together by survival. And their whole like sort of thing was that they're willing to do what the other people won't. So it's a little bit berserk, you know what I mean? That manga where you have like a person who's not necessarily a good person as your protagonist. You're not playing the Ricks of The Walking Dead, you're playing the Negans, if that makes sense. In this new world, only the strongest and the smartest and the most ruthless could survive. Doom companies were not just a means of survival, they were the last hope for humanity in a world that had been consumed by death. As the creeping death rose higher and higher, swallowing the world whole, the companies stood defiant, fighting not just for their lives, but at the very essence of what it meant to be human. So there's our sort of like, it's a synopsis kind of the world. There is a ton more lore, and there's even a podcast on the lore of this world. And you can jump in and join on 1490doom.com and the Doom Warriors Discord to find out more and join, like listen to podcasts and stuff as well. So let's dive into the nitty gritty of the rules themselves. What do you need to play? It is basically a Doom company of 3 models. It's not a huge amount of survivors here. They don't set a scale, but they say roughly 28 by 32. So the average wargaming scale. Again, this is coming from that Kit Bash 28, hashtag crowd. So it's about making something cool and then coming up with the rules for it. Scenery, you need a 2x2 foot playing area. And it's vital. You want to have all kinds of cool ruins and decaying sort of fog-ridden areas and woods for you to fight through. You need a measuring stick in inches. You need some dice, D6s. During setup, it can be helpful to have a D4 as well for the quarters, but you don't have to have it. And then resource caches. You need 3 to 5 markers for resource caches. We tend to use these models as boxes or chests, but anything distinct, basically like an apple cart or like something where you might find some supplies to survive is what we're looking for here. They're a bit like the supply counters that I had in Last Days where you're digging through backpacks and, old cases of beer to try and find something to take back to the refuge. And as you can see, it's hard. I can't show you I wish I could show 2 pages. I wonder if there's a way I can do this in the future where I can show 2 pages at once to show these layouts, because the spread's really nice. And again, the terrain and stuff is really cool, the Kit Bash stuff. And it's really reflected in Barrett's art, where he's definitely gotten the memo here. All right. Gameplay and mechanics. Activations. The players who win the initiative roll at the beginning of each round goes first. If the roll's a tie, the player who went last in the previous round goes first. So Lord of the Rings rules. Both players activate models in alternating order, so alternating activations. A single round consists of both players all activating their models once. You can each take turns choosing a model in your Doom Company. They can now move, dash, or use any actions and special abilities that they have. Every model has 2 actions per activation, unless they have like an item or ability that gives them like a free action. An action must be completed before another one started. Once it's completed, the next player activates a model. When both players have finished it, the round is over. So nice, simple, core, alternating activation structure. You can do any of these actions. So move your movement value in inches, dash up to 2 additional inches. You do each action once, by the way. You can't double them down, so that's why there's a move and a dash. Feels a little kilty-me. Push, move any enemy model in base contact with you 1 inch in a direction. You can have a skill check to not fall off things as well. So you can shove people, which I think is really cool. Stand by, it's like hold an action, reload. If your weapon's out of ammo, you can reload it. Expend a consumable, so something like a potion or, the magical sharpening stone, whatever that ends up being. And then scale, which is a climb action. And then some examples of how that works for movement, because obviously this is a terrain-rich game, so there's plenty of stuff in here for how to do that. Handing things off, so give something to somebody else. Scale down, which means climb down. Set a ladder, so if you have a ladder, you can put it up against the wall. Set a grappling hook, you can throw it up to make a climb point. Retrieve climbing gear, you can pick up your climbing gear. Climb, inspect a resource cache, or open a door. All these might require a skill check, which means that you have to test to see if you're successful or not. And then this is now the breakdown of those rules. So making a move action, how terrain interacts with that, how you fall and how to take fall damage, and how you jump. Your statuses, if you're stunned, a model can't take any actions in the next activation, so you forfeit your action, basically. Breached. A breached model must make a skill check every time they activate. If they fail to take a damage, that ignores defense. A model remains breached for the rest of the game. So basically, you're bleeding out. Immobilized. An immobilized model cannot move, dash, or scale, or use any other actions that would require them to do so, such as rage, until the next activation. So you're, held down or whatever, caught in a trap. All right, so attack actions. When you make an attack action or another special action that involves a combat check, choose a weapon or 2 light melee weapons if you're double handing. Choose an enemy model to attack. For range weapons, check the targets in line of sight and weapon range. Roll a combat check. If you roll less than your combat stat, the attack misses. If you roll equal to or greater than your combat stat, the attack strikes true. So combat stats are basically like it's a 40k stat, like 3 plus, 4 plus, 5 plus. For every success, the model rolls a defense check. They get a cover bonus of +1 if you use a ranged weapon and 50% or more of your model was obscured. So obviously you're hiding behind stuff. And if you pass your defense check, then does no damage. If you fail it, they reduce their vitality equal to your weapon's damage. So you can have weapons that do more than 1 wound, but it's effectively roll to hit. There is no roll to wound. It's make an armor save. And then if you fail it, you take some damage. Piercing blow. It's a critical basically on a combat roll of a 6. You score a piercing blow that ignores defense rolls. The first time a model reaches a piercing blow, they become breached and might keep bleeding out. Think of it like in The Last of Us 2 when you get hit by an arrow and you have to pull the arrow out or you keep taking damage. Climbing combat. So some rules for specialty fighting if you're on the side of something, because again, this is supposed to be every time I read the rules for this, I kind of envisioned the fight between Inigo Montoya and the Dread Pirate Roberts in The Princess Bride, where he's climbing up and they're just jumping around stuff. And then end of the round, once all the models are activated, the round ends. Players begin the next round by rolling for initiative, and if it's a tie, the player who went the previous round goes first. So you can see here, we're on page 19, and that's the entire core mechanics of the game. So 8 pages of core mechanics. And now we're into the bulk of it, which is building your warband. So the next 40-ish pages are scenarios and creating your characters. Because if you're only going to have 3 characters, you can get down to the nitty-gritty. You get warriors and captains. Every player begins the Doom Company comprised of 3 warriors. Players cannot choose the same warrior more than once. Once your warrior's been chosen, select a single warrior in your company to be your company captain, and they gain a +1 improvement point, which means a skill. And once per game, they can reroll a single dice roll. So they're your guy in charge. It's kind of Darkest Dungeon-y in that regard. Improvement points. In addition to your captain, Doom Company start with 2 general improvement points. Before the game starts, these can be used to improve a single stat, except for attacks. Equip a model with a second weapon, give them a climbing item or a consumable item. And only 1 point can be spent on each single warrior, so basically all 3 of them can have a single thing. Your warrior profiles. On each warrior's profile, you'll have your movement, which is how far you can move. Your attacks, this is how many times the warrior rolls within a weapon. Their vitality, this is how much damage you can take before you die. Your skill for skill checks, can you try to roll equal to or higher. Combat, same thing. And defense, which is your save. And then we got all our classes, and I love this. It's very character driven. So because we have a class system, it's kind of really easy to use the miniatures that you created and you like. You can see the kit bashing in this game where it's does this guy look like a scout? Does he have light weapons? Make him a scout. So 6-inch move, rolls 1 dice to attack, can take 4 damage. 4+ to hit, 5+ to save, 4+ for skill, 5+ for your combat attacks, and a 4+ defense. Everybody gets like a little host of special skills too. So early bird, you get to have 4 inches of extra deployment. I can smell it. After deployment of all Doom companies, the scout can deploy a resource cache anywhere within 6 to get a bonus resource potentially, and then take the initiative once per game. A player with a living scout can claim the initiative after losing the initiative roll. In addition, if there's ever a tie, if you have a living scout, they go first. And if you have a scout, then you resolve it based on who went last. Assassins. So again, like better combat, same defense, worse skill. Moves a little bit slower, but has a higher vitality and stuff like that. Has the Night Stalker rule. The assassin can be targeted, cannot be attacked until after he makes his first attack, push, or interact with a resource because you're disguised as somebody. Kill shot once per game after a successful combat check. Check the assassin may perform a kill shot that does 4 damage. The assassin can only kill shot a model that is not activated this round because they're unaware. The attack ignores your defense rolls. And then Camouflage Climber. An assassin only requires a 3+ on skill checks to make the climb action because he's good at climbing. And we get all kinds of other things. Scavengers for grabbing your items. A fighter, a classic like sword and shield swordsman. A brute. Big like barbarian type. Warrior priest. And a Zabateur. And those are our core classes for this. Now, as I explained earlier, that solo mission and the future expansions that they're making are going to have more classes added into it. But these are the core ones in the rulebook. More cool Barrett Stanley art. And then we got to do our weapons and equipment. Unless otherwise stated, each Warrior Doom Company starts with a weapon of your choice, and the Warrior provides profile will list weapon types, and you can choose to use them or not use them. So heavy weapons, heavy polearms, and again, you'll see the weapons are all classed kind of like by style as opposed to being like a specific, like, here's your two-handed sword, here's your short sword, here's your katana. It's more like, what does that kit bash you may generally look like? So use weapons that way. And then it'll be like range will be contact for melee weapons, and have a 5-inch range for a crossbow, 10-inch range for a bow, how far you can shoot and stuff like that. Shields give you bonuses. So like once per round, a model with a, can prevent a push action with a shield. In addition, if you're targeted each round for the first time, you get +1 to your defense against that attack because you're bringing your shield up. And then you get climbing items like ladders and climbing hooks. Imagine carrying a ladder, and I want to model something with a climbing thing. I love this weapon. So one of your consumable items is literally a canister of the poison fog, the fog that turns your skin inside out. These are files or jars filled with a dense amount of the creeping death. You can use them as an action. The model can throw the canister anywhere they have line of sight to and within range of their current vitality +1 in inches. Whenever the canister lands, has a 2-inch radius, they must roll a skill check, and every model that fails takes a damage and is immobilized until the next activation. And then you get Creeping Death Serum to like get rid of it. And Fog of War like has like a weird like blast. So it's like a smoke cloud basically. And ways to play. These are your scenarios. So Spirit of the Game, I really like that this is included in here in the scenario section because, and he really underlines it. Before that, though, we at Beer Games wish to make something crystal clear. Miniature games are a very diverse hobby and pastime celebrating for many reasons unique to each player and artist. We encourage you and your opponent to enjoy this and all of our games in any way you see fit. However, we prioritize thematic and simple gameplay over competitive balance, atmosphere, tense and exciting gameplay where you win and lose, the narrative and artistic triumphs, and a bleak, grimdark world about surviving in the face of futility. I love that as a mission statement where it's supposed to feel hard and people are supposed to die. And that was the point of what we're trying to do here. There's 6 core scenarios that say use the standard rules. And these are the standard rules for that. Like how do you set up your 2x2 board, your terrain, placing down resource caches in the 4 quadrants, and then roll your d4s to see where they go. And then what do you find inside them? So herbs and tonics, food, scholarly scrolls, maps, cloaks, and reliquaries. Now I have little special rules. Every game lasts for 7 rounds. The game also ends if an entire Doom company dies. If there's a tie, fight to the death. If no one's won yet, and then you get your victory conditions and your deployment rules. And then you get our cool scenarios. They're all thematic, right? So like the first signs, like where you're trying to get to the high ground because there's weird fog coming. The madness below, you're trying to keep things from coming up out of the fog. The chittering doom of the rats. Imagine like the rats fleeing the poison gas. The siege of Newcastle, Newcastle, Neuchâtel, I think it is. Castle. Why do you struggle with that? Because I wanted to say chateau, which is castle in French, but then Neuchâtel as opposed to chateau threw me off there for a second. It's like a siege. The Crumbling Bastion, where you're trying to defend a place that you're staying for the night, and the Creeping Death Consumes All, where like the table's getting smaller and things are starting to like get like very foggy as it advances. And then we get rules for campaigns at the end here for having your buildings like crumble around you and having cool environmental conditions based upon the year, which I thought was neat. So it's either 1490, 1491, 1492, 1493, or 1494. It'll determine which year it's happening and how bad the fog is, which I thought was great. And then the audio lore and podcast series and the Doom community are here at the end, and that is it. So yeah, super fun, characterful, pre-made classes, lots of emphasis again on creating like a core experience where you model the miniatures you like, you pick a thing for them, like a core mechanic of who they are, you equip them the way that you think they look and the weapons they have, and then you play a series of like linked narrative games. The focus obviously being on the story being done. I'm really excited about the Fall of Rothenburg, and we'll take a look at that in the campaign when we finally run it. But I'm excited for a solo and co-op experience. So let's check in with the chat and see everybody's doing here. And what they thought of 1490 Doom. Acrylic Emma says, did someone say Doom? Heavy Metal Riff begins to play. When I think of Doom, I think of the bit from what was that cartoon? Invader Zim. Doom, 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 doom. This robot seems not good. Chris Gibson's here, Ryan Dunphy's here, Gene Dean's here, Mike Grimson's here, said, hey, I made it. I can only stay for about 30 minutes before I head home for the day and have to catch the rest of this later. And then Malev says, it's me. I picked these things. Malev's here in the chat. And yeah, talking about Magos as being really creative and Barrett doing great art. Joe Spinsky says, any games that lets me defenestrate my opponent makes me happy. If you can push somebody out a window, that's pretty fantastic. And then, yeah, I think that's it. Just look at all the kit bashes. People looking through the kit bash community for this. There's a ton of great miniatures that people have made for this. And there's some official STLs as well that I think are the ones that Malev painted up, which are pretty cool. So let's talk about our pairing today. This one I went for because this is one of my series favorite. This is a Garsky Games Sword Weirdos, a skirmish Heartbreaker. And it is, man, this is a classic. I love Sword Weirdos and Space Weirdos. We're going to start with Sword Weirdos here, but these are old school inspired dark science fiction and fantasy games in the tone of like C-series 80s and 90s Warhammer. So it's got kind of a punk rock feel. I think you can tell from the cover here what you're getting into, right? Where it's a bunch of freaks. It's done in a zine style, which is super fun. And it's only $5. So if you want to grab this, it's $5 on Drive-Thru-RPG or Wargames Vault. I always grab mine through Drive-Thru-RPG for whatever reason. And yeah, it's about 5-10 models a side. Use any miniatures that you have. It's about 24 pages. Minimal tokens but still a few because I like them. No tape measures or rulers. You use what are called sticks, and every stick is a 5-inch measuring unit. It's a little bit like the game we did last week, Full Spectrum Dominance, where you decide upon your measuring scale. They just decided that a stick is 5 inches, so you just measure anything inside that. There's also a separate solo rules document and a PDF with all the tokens, hobby advice, and a warband sheet. So when you download this, you get the solo rules on top of it, but it's not baked into the core rules. So if you don't want to use them, they're just a separate aside. And also when you do use them, you can just reference them to one side. Oh yeah, here on the sidebar, there's Ryan Dunphy's Anthems of War too. That's cool. We reviewed that on GMG Reviews. So yeah, again, wonderful cover on this. I love the zine style stuff. If you grew up going to rock shows and punk shows, then you know what art style we're talking about here. And this is my shit right here. I love this. I thought Sword Weirdos was a good one to pair. And so, yeah, so this was written by Casey Garsk, and the cover is by Lucas Kowalczyk, I'm going to say, and layout by Simon Gusick. And after I released my first minis game, Space Weirdos, I started to get a lot of, when are you going to do a fantasy version? Which is great. I was glad people liked Space Weirdos enough to want a fantasy version of the rules, but I wondered if I would do things differently as opposed to reskinning Space Weirdos. Now, I wanted to mention this because this isn't just the same game with different miniatures. And so it does have a different feel to it, basically. So your game materials, you need 3 or more miniatures for your warbands. So depending on how powerful they are, you can have smaller or larger warbands. 1 or more 5-inch sticks for measuring, 2 each of the usual dice, D4s to D12s, and then a 2x2 or 3x3 playing area, depending upon the size of the game. Lots of terrain and tokens for movements, conditions, and spells. You'll often be asked to increase or decrease. So this uses a scaling dice mechanic, the type of dice that you're rolling. So if you get +1 DT or -1 DT, that means you go up or down a dice size. So you go from D4 to D6 to D8 to D10 to D12, and you'd scale up and down. No roll can go lower than D4, and it can never go higher than D12, no matter how much you stack modifiers. Some classes and weapons add a bonus to the roll. So that's different from a dice type. Your dice type doesn't scale. It just adds to the number that you roll, and then you can never reroll a dice more than once. Opposed and unopposed rolls. When making an opposed roll, you might have to pick two different stats and roll those dice against each other. So if you got an attack stat of D6 and a defense stat of D8, you'd each roll your dice, apply any modifiers, and the total would win. When making an unopposed roll, such as recovering from staggered, you roll your dice, and if your opponent rolls 2d6, if you equal or exceed the roll, you succeed. So an unopposed roll is always just against like a standard dice roll. And then measuring and movement. Measuring is done in sticks, a 5-inch long stick marked in the middle. Within a stick means a stick is placed between a model and the other model, and both features touch. So like if your two bases touch, or if the terrain feature in your base touch, then you've got yourself in range. Movement's always in a straight line through sticks. So if you want to turn, you got to go that 5-inch turn, right? And this is a small scale game, so maneuvering, you might not move the entire distance when you go in a straight line. A model touching another model in base-to-base contact. A model is always in base-to-base with itself. And then you got a grand total of 4 stats: speed, defense, might, and will. And speed is rated 1 to 3. It's how many sticks basically you go during a move and or disengage action. I almost got out. Defense rated with dice, such as 2d6, a measure of how hard the model is to wound. Might, 2d8, for instance, would be how much combat expertise and weapon power you have. And then will, rated with dice, such as 2d6, a measure of your mental strength and bravery. So the speed stat's kind of like the not rolling a checks one, and then all the rest of them are going to be ones that you'll make tests against. Your warband is going to be a leader and their troops. And then you get a refresh phase where everybody goes ready. Initiative phase, you goes first, activation phase, then maintenance phase, where any of the endgame effects happen. So in the refresh phase, you replenish your pool of maneuver points. You gain 2 maneuver points per round for a 75-point game, 3 for 100, and 4 for 125. And then unused ones are lost at the end of the round. Players roll 2d6 to see who has the initiative for the round. The high roller chooses which player will activate a model first in the activation phase. A warband with a tactician leader gets +1 dice type, so 2d6 would go to 2d8. A broken warband goes down, so you go to 2d4. And a warband that regrouped in the last maintenance phase rolls +1 dice type. So basically, if you came back from running away. Then activation phase. The player with the initiative decides which of their models will activate first. The player activates activating models until all have been activated. So it's not I go you. It's not alternate activations. It's I go you go. And each model can take up to 3 actions on its turn in any order chosen from the list below. Some options use more than 1 action, and some can only be taken a certain number of times in 1 activation. Resolve more actions fully before moving on to the next. So you can move, make a melee attack, make a ranged attack, reload, disengage, cast spells, recover, stand, and interact. These are all like your core things that you can do. And you can do 3 of them instead of the normal 2, which means you can do things like move, shoot with your gun, and if it's like a reload gun like a crossbow, then reload it and be ready to act next turn. And then just core descriptions for all these actions. You can see it's a fairly granular game. It reminds me a little bit core mechanic wise of something like Warzone. Old 2nd edition Mutant Chronicles Warzone. It was squad-based combat, but it worked like this, where everybody in the squad, which would be roughly analogous to like a warband in this game, all do individual actions model by model and activate in order until they're all done. So like in a squad in Warzone, the leader could activate, look out, throw a grenade, and then because he had 3 actions, like duck back behind cover, but then his grunts all with 2 actions would like look out and aim, and then next turn have an aim token for they shoot, or already be standing there, shoot, and then duck back behind cover. Like everybody did something different, and you could do them in any order that you wanted to do them in. That's kind of this game. So like ranged attacks, you have all your modifiers for up and down dice types, for if you're running or there's cover, and then we get this big like results table for your thing. So if you're greater, so basically it's a margin of success game versus the 2 dice pool. So if I make an attack roll and you make a defense roll, if it's less than the defense roll, it misses. If it's greater than defense roll, it's hit and you roll on the attack result table for if it's melee or ranged. If it's double, you get +1 on the table. If it's triple, you get +2 on the table. So you push people higher up the table. And it's 2d6 on the roll. So the average roll is going to be 7, which puts you down. But if you triple the defense roll, it's going to be +2, right? And if you roll low, you might get bonus actions coming back at you. So for instance, and I like this thing where attacking is always risky because even if you hit, like, you might just screw up and have something happen where in your melee they counterstrike you if able. The defending model may immediately make a melee attack action against the attacker. Or shooting, the guy takes cover. If able, the defending model moves a stick and this model must bring it into contact with an enemy model. So like, or must not. They like run behind cover, run behind a wall or something like that. And then high roll is like down staggered, out of action. There's also spell attacks because it goes against your will roll when you get hit by a spell. So if you are half the defender's will roll, you're affected by your own spell. Your magic goes out of control and attacks you, which I really like. So instead of having a miscast table, again, it's margin of success to see what happens. If it's greater than defender's will roll, the spell fails. If it's just less, it fails. And if it's greater than, the spell takes effect. And then all of our other actions are in here, like reloading, disengaging, so falling back. And then we get into our rules for building a warband. So there's 3 game scales, 75, 100, 125. 2-foot tables for 75, and then up to 3x3 for 100 and 125. Your WEIRDOS may cost up to 25 points each. So you can't dump all your cash into one guy, and that's why the minimum model count is going to be 3 for a 75-point game. And your warband stats are not secret. Everything's open information. And then you build your own characters. And this is the thing that I love. So you WYSIWYG them with what they're armed with. So the miniatures have to have what they look like. Choose a class, purchase weapons, purchase properties, maneuver points, and maneuvers. And maneuvers represent the strengths of your warband. So maneuvers are things that are like bonuses. So your maneuver points you get at the start of the round, they're basically your leader calling special actions, almost like the heroic actions in the Middle-earth strategy battle game where you could like follow me, you know what I mean? Do like combined charges and stuff like that. And then you can purchase attributes with your leftover points. So the point costs for the attributes are here. Buy spells. And then we get right into setting up the game and playing scenarios. So here's some examples. So for instance, the Hexenhammer's Jaegers, 100 points of Witch Hunters. Johann Hexenhammer, he's 24 points. He's a hunter, swashbuckler, leader, and mage killer for his special rules that he bought. He has 2 sticks of movement, 2d8 defense, 2d8 might, and 2d10 for his will. He's got a torch and 2 pistolets. He's got Herman the Pit Fighter, who's speed 2, with a 2-handed axe. Gretel the Fighter with a 1-handed axe and a pistolet. Hansel with a 2-handed crossbow and a dagger. And Fritz the Krieghunt with a bite. You know what that shirt sounds like? That shirt sounds like somebody got the warband from Warhammer Underworlds, because that's literally the models from Warhammer Underworlds, and they just made stats for it. So if you want to pre-play this game, and I love it that he put this in here, there's some built lists in here that are basically stuff that you've miniatures you might already have at home. And he's done a bunch of this in here. Some scenarios, kill them all, objectively normal scenario, treasure surprise, and treasure chests. And they're all just like themed terrains. And then we get a little FAQ in here as well. All the classes and the skills they start with, right? So you can be an acrobat, an alchemist, an archer. And the classes are my favorite thing here because they just buy you your skill set and your basic point cost and how many you can have in your warband. Druids, fighters, flyers, fools, healers. And what's funny is, as much as it's like a 24-page rulebook, there's so many classes in this one. It's kind of why I wanted to show it in like side-by-side 1490 Doom, because you use a very similar like warband construction system, but this one's like just a little bit wider at the start with like the number of classes that you get. And then optional powerful models, they can have higher point values basically than anything else. Or you can have your commander, for instance, be like 30 points instead of 25. And then a huge list of weapons and weapon tables for things to buy. All the special rules and properties for like if they knock things down. We get into our spell lists, all the different spells you can buy or that you start with based on your class. Things that your leaders can do, special rules, and then special traits for your overall warband, and some play examples, and a quick ref. Yeah, there's a lot packed into Sword Weirdos for $24 or for $4 and 24 pages. It is a very comprehensive skirmish game that really allows you to use any miniatures you want and have a ton of fun playing like a head-to-head game. And like I said, the solo rules are in this purchase and they're separately. I'm not going to show them today because it's just they're solo rules. It's for basically creating additional warbands and then how do you activate them. It's the AI section. It's not relevant to this, but they come included in that $5. So for $4.99, it's not bad. So let's check in with the chat one more time. And that's basically it. 1490 Doom and Sword Weirdos, 2 really fun, dark fantasy, adventure games here on the Indie Hour. So I think if you're looking, so what's great about Sword Readers is Sword Readers is fully open-ended. If you want to compare these two and like which one would I buy, Sword Readers is a completely open-ended, use the miniature collection you want. Here's a dark fantasy set of rules and some generic sort of like classes and stuff like that to build with. It's old red box D&D. 1490 Doom is a survival horror dark fantasy experience with a very specific world and a very specific feel to it. And these wonderfully curated like solo play stories that are going to keep getting bolted onto it. So what I think is fun is you can use the same model collection for both of these. Sword Weirdos is my friends are coming over and they're not invested in this and we're just using my model collection. Whereas 1490 Doom is me and my buddy who are super into this dark metal world are both going to make war bands and see which of our Doom companies basically survives climbing higher and higher while the fog chases us. And they're separate experiences, but I think that like one model collection basically lets you play both of these an infinite amount. And I think what's going to happen is Magos Buer is going to have probably like many years to come of stories to tell in this universe as the fog basically continues to destroy the earth. And when you're in between chapters of that story, Sword Readers is a great fill-in for you to use that model collection, even just keep telling the story or play something fun. And I think they fit together perfectly. So let's see what the chat says, and then we're going to sign off for next week. A Space Gamer says, I'm thinking of building a board and bringing this to a local con so we can run through the campaign over the course of the day. I do think that 1490 would be a fantastic day-long campaign, especially the co-op missions. That co-op story of like 3 missions would be super fun. And because it's only 3 miniatures, it's a great bring-in battler. And if you just, in the invite, publish the classes and not even the rules and say, hey, bring miniatures that would fit this description of either fighter, assassin, whatever, like bring in 3 miniatures, each of which, you know, fits one of these words and we're ready to play. You could do a bring-in battle with just that information and people would have a great time. Right now he says, nice to see my game pop up in the sidebar. I know that I was so excited that happened and that you were here at the same time. Gene says, I love the stick distance. Works and makes things so much easier to judge. Yeah, no like finite, super fine measuring is I think great. Right now he says, I think a Song of Blades and Heroes does a similar measurement mechanic. It does, yeah. Acrylic Chemist says, I definitely need to try both these at some point this year. And then Gene Dean says, would it be as easy to do as one-page rules looking to teach the youth? Definitely. I think the focus on both of these, if you look at the page count, there is a lot of time given to letting you make your own stuff. OPR tends to focus on here's a list of like pre-made generic unit types and you pick from that and then play your game. This one is make your own based on the miniature that you have. And then here's a nice, easy to learn set of rules. So like the rules are less information than like the options are. And that means that you're only really interacting with this much information during gameplay time. And it's the pre-meta game where you're getting to like go create like the sandbox and the bag of Legos is bigger in this one. But then the playset at the end of it is basically the same between the two of them. And yet we will get to all of these eventually because this is the point of the indie hour, right? We get to hang out and pick games that you normally wouldn't get to see and then talk about them. And there is like an infinite list of games for us to get to. And they keep writing more every single day. My inbox is full of all kinds of cool ones. And you guys are going to get to vote for the next one this week. So big thanks to my patrons for the pick. Big thanks to Molev, for obviously bringing this to our attention with his lovely painting. And to the folks at 1490 Doom and Sword Weirdos for making great games that you guys should go check out. Next week's entry will be picked by the patrons. The poll will go up Friday, and then we'll be recording this. As you're watching this live on YouTube, we should at some point during that day be recording this live on that Wednesday for the following week, and you get to see what they picked and what's happening. So get involved, shine a spotlight on all kinds of cool indie games, and we will have more of this coming to you in the future. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you for the next Indie Hour next week. Till then, I'm Ash.